Hello everyone! In this video I will provide a little tour of my corn snake's terrarium. Now this terrarium is non-bioactive and it didn't really involve any sort of DIY projects, and the terrarium itself and quite a few of the elements inside it were actually bought secondhand. But I do like the way it turned out. As a bit of background information, I adopted my corn snake at the end of 2020 and she arrived in what was essentially a 45 by 45 centimeter cube with one branch, one hide, a water bowl and no heating. Unfortunately, it's quite common for people to keep corn snakes like this here in France, although most will at least provide a heat mat. Here, like in many other countries, people will often just buy a snake without even bothering to do the most basic research, which leads to many reptiles being kept in subpar conditions. Luckily, I bought the terrarium that she is currently in only a few days after initially getting the corn snake, so I was able to upgrade her quite quickly. So, without further ado, here's the current state of my terrarium in mid-2021. Now, I might still make changes to the setup in the future, but for now I'm quite happy with it. The terrarium is 120 centimeters long and 60 centimeters tall and wide. For you Americans out there, that is what you would call a 4 by 2 by 2. Now, this is a good size because my corn snake is slightly less than 120 centimeters long, which means she can stretch out fully along the side of the terrarium, which is something that, in my opinion, a snake should be able to do in its enclosure. Okay, let's get started on the warm side of her enclosure. Here we have her warm hide, which sits directly under the light, which acts as the heat source for this terrarium. Inside the dome is a 100-watt incandescent light bulb that is controlled by a habitat dimming thermostat with the probe located on the surface of the hide. So I set the surface temperature of the hide to be at 32 degrees Celsius, which is the ideal basking spot temperature, but this also makes the inside of her hide 29 degrees, which according to most of the corn snake care guides I read should be an ideal warm hide temperature. The hide itself is a snake cave by the brand Trixie, and the snake really seems to enjoy this hide. I also have a digital thermometer / hygrometer in the corner of the warm side. This is a really cheap one you can get for like 10 euros off Amazon. And I really recommend installing one in your terrarium because it's very useful when it comes to maintaining an exact humidity and temperature. I use aspen bedding for the base of the terrarium, which is a decent substrate because it's very absorbent and easy to clean, and the snake can tunnel around in it. But personally, I would have preferred to use something like eco-earth, but the way the terrarium is constructed doesn't really allow for that because you have these weird ledges on the sides of the terrarium and this ventilation part at the front where dirt would just be able to fall out. However, I do put other kinds of substrate into the snake hides, so I'm okay with having aspen as like the ground substrate. Now, if we look to the side, we find the two other hides. One is a snake cave, this one is by the brand Zoomed, and the other is a hollow log that is slightly elevated by having it wedged against the wall. Now, the log acts as another warm hide for the snake, but because of its structure that has cracks and gaps in it, it also allows for basking as light can get through, and it is located directly under the UVB light. Which means the snake can use this as her basking spot, but I've also seen her bask out of the other hides by just sticking various parts of her body out. Now, the Zoomed cave that is under the log is also her humid hide. There's moss inside that I try to keep damp. I also have moss and eco-earth in the other cave hides. This is mainly so she can dig around inside the hide, but this is also to elevate the humidity within the hide to a level that is higher than the ambient humidity in my apartment, because my apartment can be extremely dry, especially in the winter. However, the Zoomed hide is the only hide that I really try to keep consistently damp. Lastly, we have her fourth hide, the cold hide. Now, this is the same model as the cave on the warm side of the enclosure. It was gifted to me as a Christmas present because the person giving it didn't know that I had already bought the same model myself. But I think it's perfect that way because the snake really does prefer these hides over all other models. Another reason that these caves are awesome is that they are closed at the bottom, which means that apart from being able to put things like moss inside, you can also pick the entire thing up with the snake inside, just like a little transport box. So if I want to clean the terrarium, for instance, I can just take her out in her little cave, put the cave next to the terrarium, and then put her back in when I am done, which is the perfect way to deal with a shy snake such as mine. On the cool side, we also have her water dish, which I got along with her from her previous owner. It's a bit gross looking due to limescale residue, but I do clean it regularly, but at the same time I don't want to use like limescale remover on it. I also like that it's quite big, so she can easily fit herself inside, and it also helps raise the humidity of my at times dry and crusty apartment. Now, for enrichment, we have multiple branches that I bought along with the terrarium, as well as these plasticky plants that were also included. Now, if you look at the plants closely, you'll see that they're not especially pretty or realistic, but when strategically positioned, they help give the terrarium a naturalistic, lush appearance, and the snake doesn't care either way. I recently bought this vine as well that runs across the terrarium. I bought it from a local reptile store because I saw videos of corn snakes engaging in arboreal behavior in the wild, so I wanted to get mine more things to climb on. However, she just seems to ignore it completely. She really doesn't seem interested in climbing much at all. I haven't seen her use it a single time, but this might be because she is shy and doesn't like being out in my presence. Although she is getting more comfortable, as we can see by the fact that she is out now while I am blabbing at her terrarium and filming. I also got her this hammock from Amazon for like €5 that she could use as a climbing platform or a platform for basking, but she seems to care about that one even less than the vine. Now, at the time of recording, I've actually removed this hammock because, it was completely pointless. As you may have also noticed, we have this lovely naturalistic looking background, which in my opinion really elevates the entire aesthetic of the terrarium. I ordered it off Amazon from this German company that specializes in like terrarium equipment. If you live in mainland Europe, you could probably order it to your country as well, and I can put the link below. And I'm not sponsored, by the way. It costs like €50, which is not even that expensive for a background. Like, these things can be ridiculously expensive, but it looks incredibly nice, at least from a distance. If you look more closely, you will see that the wooden elements are from real bark, but the mossy looking green bits are made from this flimsy plastic fuzz, which was pretty awful when the thing first arrived because it shed all over the place. I had to go over it with a vacuum cleaner like 10 times before the shedding stopped. But now that it did, and I have successfully installed it at the back of my terrarium, I think it looks quite nice. And without it, the terrarium definitely wouldn't look this good or natural, even though it's completely fake. Lastly, we have the UVB lighting, which is the Arcadia Forest Dweller 6% UVB light. My rough estimate, based on the company description, is that the basking zones within my enclosure range from 3 if the snake is right under the mesh to around 1 if the snake is at the ground level of the enclosure. Although I don't have a UV meter at the moment, so I can't say for sure. I did notice an increase in the amount of cryptic basking behavior after adding the UVB, as the snake would stick her head and other parts of her body out more often during the day compared to when she only had the heat lamp. So if you can afford it, I would really recommend looking into getting your snake some UVB lighting because they do benefit from it, even if it is not necessary for their survival. And then lastly, I would just like to point out these stick-on doorknob type things that literally cost €1, but they allow me to open and close the terrarium doors without getting my disgustingly greasy hands on the glass. And that concludes the terrarium tour. I hope you enjoyed it. I just realized I forgot to mention the leaves that you see lying around the terrarium are leaves that I collected from a local forest, and then I boiled them to essentially disinfect them. And I think that's a great way to really enhance the appearance of any terrarium and also add some enrichment for your animal. It's just by just throwing some leaves in there, and they just look good in general because they're leaves. If you like this, feel free to subscribe because I am planning to post more snake related content in the future. I adopted a ball python with some very interesting behavioral patterns who I am currently upgrading into a wooden terrarium I am assembling myself. And I am also planning to target train my corn snake with mixed success at the moment, which I hope to document as well. I also occasionally post content about art, mainly featuring fish, and sometimes just general lifestyle chit chat. I don't know. Anyways, thank you for watching. Goodbye.